because it's rare to get a European project funded with a component in it where you want to invite so many beautiful and wonderful and experienced people and pay for their travel. It's rare. But we managed, and we're very, very happy to have you all here and to greet you here and to learn together with you what open educational practices can be about. The project is, or the meeting is very, very timely. We have made the experience that once we enter this project, the field of, or the community, let's say, of OER/OEP, Open Educational Practitioners, Open Educational Resource, activists, professionals, you are really into, let's say, a running movement. And we felt that coming with our ideas, they were very, very appreciated, but everything is moving very quickly. And so, in this project, which is now at the end of its first year, we are really feeling that there's very, very little time to think in this environment, because things are continuously evolving and developing, and in order to make up our mind what can we contribute to the movement, we felt that it's very important to bring a group of people for 2 days together to really try to think about these things. And that's why we feel it was important to come together, not to have a virtual meeting or to have a forum discussion also, but really to come together and look into each other's eyes and see what we can develop together, and to really take time to finish discussions also, and to take decisions also, to formulate a message which we as a group here can send out into the community of open educational practitioners, and which we can also try to contribute to this initiative, the OPAL initiative. We like to refer to this not as a project, but rather as an initiative, because we feel that there is probably an opportunity to keep this alive beyond the funding period, and that's what we aim very much to do also. The question which we started out with in this initiative actually was that we sat together and we asked the question, will learning actually improve when resources are all openly available? And we felt that this probably would not be the case, because the pure availability is not automatically leading to learning experiences which are tailored to exactly the need in the different contexts the target groups and stakeholders have. Zeynep was, in her introduction, referring to the discussion we were leading over the OER mailing list of the UNESCO, and there was one professional from a German university, Stefanie here. I omitted the last name to see that the verification could be made. And she was contributing a post in the whole frame of the discussion, which was actually called The Big Shift. And the Big Shift was referring to how can we come from resources to practices. And she was contributing a post in which she was talking about OER frustrations. And I was feeling that this is actually very much in the heart of what we aim to discuss with you and what we would like as an initiative to bring to the OER movement. She was saying that she, in a language class, she offered open resources to students, and she said that whereas some students really enjoyed this open learning opportunity, so they had time to explore this, some other students completely failed to find an activity appropriate to their level of subject and language comprehension. And then she's describing what she did and so on, and then she says in the end, are there any suggestions to deal with this OER frustration? And we were feeling that this is actually very prototypical for the question, or for, let's say, for the question how to move from resources into practices. This is a typical example of what people have to deal with. Think about the open courses which are now coming up. How to deal with this social network as a teacher or as a trainer, or as a participant, how to deal with this huge low social network. How, as an educational leader of an educational institution, how to deal with openness in the often very closed framework of institutions which we are working in, and so on. We would like to also put at the beginning of our discussions a little bit maybe a provocative, let's say, thought. And this provocative thought would be to say, can we actually understand ourselves as open educational practitioners, as practitioners of a second phase, of a second wave, or a second stage of the OER movement? Whereas the first phase was focusing on availability, accessibility, building infrastructures. Now, resources are available, and I am aware that this is not the case all over the world, at least, or actually only in the smallest part of the world. But we feel that it's actually not so much an issue of open educational resources, but rather of infrastructures which have to be dealt with. And we feel that probably the real challenge now lies into solving or answering the question, how can we bring openness to educational scenarios in which these resources are used in different contexts. We are talking about the lifelong learning agendas of our societies, in which every individual should learn at every time what is needed to solve the problem, should be aware of future challenges he or she has, etc., etc. And to maybe deepen this provocation a little bit more, can we maybe say that while in the open educational resource era, we are focusing on knowledge, capturing knowledge and making it available openly for free, openly not only cost related for free, but also freely accessible for interested stakeholders to use. While then in the open educational practitioners or practice area, we are more focused on education, training, learning processes. And what can be an education, training, learning, open concept then? What actually can be open? Open learning resources. Pedagogies can also be open. Learning paths can be open. Different, not only one fixed, pre-described learning path, but there can be different learning paths for one specific curriculum or subject. Learning contexts can also be opened, allow autonomy. We always argue from a base, I think, or I understand, where we are actually following a vision of the autonomous learner who can deal with this rich and sufficient availability of resources. Also something we might question, like Stephanie did it in her mailing list contribution. I have learners which I was supplying with open educational resources, and they didn't, or not all of them, did actually know how to deal with that. So can we scaffold them a little bit to make them more autonomous? Objectives, goals, and aims can also be open, can also have a notion of openness, especially, as I already mentioned, in the lifelong learning agenda, where learning, or the curriculum is not the same for every citizen, but has to be specific to the citizen's needs in the specific situation, and so on. Such a notion of openness, actually, when it comes to organizations, is really a matter of culture change, organizational culture change. And this organizational culture change, we felt in this initiative, is facilitated best when people have trust that this is something meaningful, something beneficial, to go from closed aspects of education, training, learning, to more open aspects of education, training, learning. And we felt that this is actually not happening so often or so well as it could be, potentially, because open educational resources are available. And the reason for that being the lack of trust. And that's why we call this initiative the Open Quality Initiative, because we felt that if we could provide guidance how open educational practices can be, let's say, introduced, how to provide guidance in a qualitative good way, that people feel this is beneficial, this brings something more to what I did before, and it's not just reproducing what we anyway did, then we would facilitate the introduction of open educational practices. That's why we chose as our focus to express that the current focus in OER initiatives is mainly on building more access. And too little consideration is given to how the open educational practices and resources and practices can actually support educational practices, promote quality and innovation in teaching and learning. We are starting with a group of organizations who are, like Jan just expressed it, is in the seed phase of this initiative, doing the dirty work for the project, which means to provide stimuli, to gather the community, to provide opportunities for discussions as well, for exchange on this topic, to, let's say, crystallize what are the issues, and then in the end to frame them into guidelines. Guidelines which are actually also the main, let's say, point of discussion here in this workshop, which will be introduced later. In addition, from day one on, actually, our attempt is also to involve leaders of open educational resource initiatives in order to confront them with this objective of ours to make a shift from resources to practices. And we have established a group for that, a body for that, which is called the Consultative Group of Open Educational Practices. And we had a first meeting already this year, which is a constituting year for the whole initiative. And from next year on, we will heavily work also with policymakers in this group. And the aim is to mainstream the thought of quality, the concept of quality and innovation into open educational resource initiatives. Open educational practices, we try to define it, and we are still not quite happy with this definition, but let's take it as a working definition. Open educational practices are for us the use of OER to improve quality and innovate educational training and learning scenarios. Our methodology is to develop guidelines, which we are harvesting from what's existing already. We are heavily tapping on the communities which are existing and trying to bring community representatives of the different OER communities together. And the focus of these guidelines will be quality of learning experiences and innovation of educational training and learning processes. Later we will introduce how we are starting to approach this, and it is an action research approach with dealing with case studies and analyzing case studies in the first phase. I'm going to skip over this quickly. We are having already extracted from the case studies a set of dimensions which we believe are important dimensions if the shift should be successful from resources to practices. These dimensions will be in the core of our discussions also, but we will introduce them later more in detail. These dimensions probably have to be refined a little more over the big categories to the real recommendations in the end. And we are aware that these dimensions, of course, have to be differently phrased for the different target groups. Like, we want to actually target what we call the governance community of open educational practices, which we currently believe is made up of learners, of educational professionals, educational institutions leaders, and policymakers.